The morning began quietly in the small neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon, but inside Emily Carter's home, everything felt slightly off. She had been rushing around since dawn, trying to handle chores, answer emails, and organize her day. Yet her mind kept drifting in directions she didn't want to admit. The house felt crowded with emotion she didn't have the courage to voice, especially when her younger brother Ethan moved around the place with a kind of heaviness that worried her. He had been staying with her for months, saying he needed time after losing his job, but Emily sensed there was more to his struggle than he let on. She didn't push him though she wanted to, but she respected the quiet pain in his eyes. She had seen it before when they were younger, whenever life tried to crush his hope, and even though they had grown distant over the years, she still cared, still wanted to keep him safe. Even if she couldn't fix everything for him, that morning she stood in the hallway, stretching up on her toes, trying to reach a box on the top shelf. It was an old box filled with winter decorations she needed for work. She had promised her manager she would bring them in, and she refused to break promises, even small ones. The shelf was too high though, and Emily could feel herself tilting backward, her balance slipping. She laughed nervously, trying to keep herself from falling, and called out toward the living room. "Hurry up, I'm losing my balance." Her voice was playful but strained. The wobble in her stance wasn't a joke anymore. She felt her body leaning too far, her fingers slipping off the rough cardboard edge, and for a moment she pictured the embarrassing fall that was about to happen. Before she could tumble, Ethan rushed into the hallway and grabbed her by the waist, steadying her quickly. His hands wrapped around her arms with a firm but gentle grip, keeping her from crashing into the floor. She let out a relieved breath, though her heart raced from more than just the near accident. "Got you," Ethan said with a small forced smile. For a second they stayed frozen like that, close, quiet, breathing the same nervous air. It wasn't awkward in a romantic way, nothing like that, but it held the weight of something unspoken, years of distance, years of unshared worries, years of pretending everything was fine. Emily straightened slowly, her feet steady again, but Ethan didn't step back right away. His eyes had a strange look, not inappropriate but troubled, something heavier than stress, heavier than exhaustion. He seemed like someone standing on the edge of telling a truth that terrified him, a truth he had kept locked inside for too long. He said quietly, "There's something I need to tell you." His voice trembled at the edges and Emily felt her heart tighten. She knew that tone. It was the tone he used when something was wrong, when he was afraid, when the world felt too heavy for him. But before Ethan could speak another word, the front door opened, letting in a burst of cold air, followed by the soft sound of footsteps. Daniel appeared in the doorway, holding a grocery bag, wearing his usual calm expression. He had known the Carters for years, had been in Emily's life longer than any relationship she ever had. He was the dependable one, the gentle one, the person she called when the world felt too loud. Emily always told herself their friendship was enough, even though her heart often whispered otherwise. But today Daniel didn't wear his usual steady smile. His expression shifted the moment he saw Ethan's hands on Emily's arms, saw how close they stood, saw the tension in the air. He paused, eyes darkening with confusion he tried to hide. Then he set the grocery bag on the nearest table, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Everything okay?" he asked, but his tone carried too many questions. Emily stepped back from Ethan quickly, her stomach twisting in a knot. She didn't want Daniel to misunderstand, didn't want him to think something was happening when it wasn't, but she didn't even know how to explain the moment herself, the timing, the intensity, the strange vulnerability between them. "It's fine," she said, forcing a smile. "I just needed help grabbing something." Daniel nodded, but the stiffness in his body didn't soften. He tried to look away, tried to pretend it didn't bother him, but Emily knew him too well. She saw the flicker of emotion in his eyes, a flash of fear, jealousy, and confusion, and that made her heart ache. Daniel was never possessive, never demanding, but he cared deeply, more deeply than he ever confessed, and right now, he didn't understand what he had walked into. Ethan stepped back completely, rubbing his neck, avoiding Daniel's gaze. His body language screamed guilt, but not for the reason Daniel assumed. Ethan wasn't hiding a forbidden closeness. He was hiding a truth he wasn't ready to share, something unrelated to the moment, something personal and painful. Emily looked at the two men, her brother with a secret trembling in his heart, and Daniel with feelings he tried to bury beneath polite calm, and she felt the pressure rise inside her chest. She hated misunderstandings, hated tension, hated any moment where people she loved looked at each other with worry instead of warmth. "Daniel, it really isn't what you think," she insisted gently. I'm not thinking anything, he replied, but the tightness in his voice betrayed him. Emily knew he was trying to be respectful, to avoid assuming to stay composed, but she also knew Daniel had walked in at the worst possible time, and it hurt her to see even a second of doubt in his eyes. Ethan cleared his throat loudly, a nervous habit he always had when he felt cornered. It was my fault, he said quickly. I was just helping her, nothing else. Daniel nodded again, but his expression didn't soften. He kept his distance, gripping the counter as if grounding himself. Emily watched him anxiously, wondering how long he had been standing outside before walking in, wondering what he had thought, what he had felt, what assumptions might have crossed his mind. She wanted to go to him, reassure him, tell him nothing strange was happening. But there were too many emotions floating in the room already: Ethan's guilt, Daniel's confusion, her own tangled feelings she had been avoiding for far too long. A quiet storm swirled between all three of them. Emily stepped toward the kitchen, trying to steady her breath, trying to push the air back into her lungs. Daniel, she said softly, can we talk after I finish this? He looked at her, really looked at her, his eyes searching for something she wasn't sure she could give. Sure, he murmured, but his voice felt fragile, almost breakable. Ethan watched the exchange with a pained expression, guilt pressing deeper into him. He knew Daniel cared for Emily, knew it before she did, knew it even before Daniel acknowledged it himself, and now this misunderstanding was forcing those unspoken emotions into the open, exposing cracks none of them planned for. Emily turned back to the shelf, her shoulders tense. She wanted to forget the moment, but she couldn't. The air between them had shifted, and pretending otherwise would have been a lie. But what truly unsettled her was Ethan's unfinished confession. His earlier words still echoed through her mind. There's something I need to tell you. Something heavy, something emotional, something he had been hiding for months. The thought haunted her, made her chest tighten with worry. She turned to face Ethan, but before she could speak, he glanced at her with distant eyes, almost haunted. He whispered, I'll explain later. His voice trembled, and that scared her more than anything else that morning. Emily didn't know it yet, but this small household moment, the almost fall, the unexpected closeness, Daniel's arrival and Ethan's interrupted confession, would change everything between them. The day that began with simple chores was becoming the day that uncovered truths none of them were ready for. And nothing in that house would feel the same again. The tension in the house grew heavier as the three of them stood in the same space, each carrying a weight they were too scared to reveal. Daniel moved to the counter and started unpacking the groceries, but his hands were stiff, every movement too controlled, like he was forcing himself to stay calm even though his mind was racing. He had walked in at the worst moment possible, and the image of Emily and Ethan standing close lingered in his thoughts no matter how hard he tried to ignore it. Emily stayed near the window, breathing slowly, trying to settle the shaking inside her chest. She hated misunderstandings and hated the idea that Daniel might think something inappropriate was happening. She cared about him deeply, far deeper than she ever dared admit, and seeing hurt in his eyes was something she wasn't ready for. Her heart wanted to reach out to him, explain everything, assure him that nothing strange had taken place, but she could tell he wasn't ready to listen yet. Not until the air quieted down. Ethan leaned against the wall, staring at the floor, his shoulders slumped forward, his whole posture filled with guilt and fear. He wished he could take back the moment, wished Daniel hadn't walked in, wished the truth he had been holding didn't push so hard against his ribs. But the moment had happened, and now every breath felt heavier, almost suffocating. Ethan knew he needed to explain himself, needed to be honest, but the words inside him were too tangled to release easily. Emily finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. Daniel, please look at me. He lifted his eyes reluctantly, trying to hide the storm inside him. It's not what you think, she said. Ethan just caught me before I fell. Daniel nodded but didn't respond right away. His jaw tightened slightly, just enough for her to notice. I'm not assuming anything, he said quietly, though his tone carried more than the words he chose. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, feeling the guilt rise again. It's my fault, he said quickly. I reached out to help her and it looked weird. I get it, I'm sorry. Daniel shook his head. You don't have to apologize to me, he said. It's fine. But Emily knew it was not fine. Daniel's gaze flickered with confusion and worry, and his attempt at calmness only made the air heavier. She felt torn between the two men, wanting to comfort her brother who seemed to be falling apart internally, but also wanting to reassure Daniel who had shown her nothing but loyalty through the years. The pressure pulled at her heart from both sides. and she suddenly wished the morning would restart so none of this tension existed. Daniel looked at Ethan and then at Emily again. "I walked in because I needed to talk to you," he said softly to her. "I was bringing groceries but I had something else to say." Emily's chest tightened at the seriousness in his voice, but before she could ask what he meant, Ethan took a step forward, his posture stiff with determination. "I need to speak first," he said, his eyes flicking between them with a desperate honesty. Daniel hesitated, but Emily gave a small nod, encouraging Ethan even though her stomach twisted with worry. "Okay," she whispered. "Go ahead." Ethan took a shaky breath, like he was preparing to jump into deep water without knowing how to swim. "The reason I've been staying here so long," he began, "is not just because I lost my job." Emily's eyes softened, concern wrapping around her. "I knew it," she said. "I knew something else was wrong." Ethan swallowed hard, the word stuck in his throat. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid you judge me or worry too much or see me differently." Daniel stepped a little closer, not in suspicion this time, but in support. "Ethan," he said gently, "we care about you. You don't have to hide things." But Ethan flinched at the word we, as if it touched a place inside him he was trying to cover. Emily moved closer, but not too close, keeping enough distance to give him space. "Tell me," she said softly. "I'm your sister. I'm here." Ethan's voice cracked. "I didn't just lose my job," he whispered. "I lost someone important to me." Emily's breath caught. "Who?" Ethan looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "Her name was Lily," he said. "We were together for almost a year." Emily's heart sank. "Ethan, why didn't you tell me you were seeing someone?" He shook his head. "Because it was complicated," he said. "She said I was distracted, that my heart wasn't fully with her, that I was holding on to something I shouldn't." Daniel and Emily exchanged a confused glance. Ethan continued, his voice growing weaker. "She left because I confessed something I shouldn't have said." Emily stepped closer. "What did you confess?" Ethan looked up at her finally, his eyes glassy. "That I loved someone else." The room went still again, the truth hanging between them like a quiet explosion. Emily's heartbeat quickened with worry, her mind running through possibilities. She didn't understand, didn't know who Ethan meant, didn't know why he looked so broken saying the words. Daniel shifted his weight, watching Ethan carefully. "Who was it?" he asked, though his voice was gentle. But Ethan didn't answer. The silence stretched long enough for both Daniel and Emily to feel the tension sharp in their chest. Emily spoke first, her voice soft. "Ethan, you can tell us." He shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do," Emily said firmly, though her voice trembled at the edges. Ethan drew in a shaky breath, then exhaled slowly. "When I moved here," he said, "I thought being close to you would help me clear my mind. But it didn't," he continued. "If anything, it made everything more confusing." Emily's eyes widened slightly, but she stayed quiet, not wanting to interrupt. Ethan looked at her with the most vulnerable expression she had ever seen on him. "I fell for someone I shouldn't have," he said. "Someone too close, someone impossible." Emily felt a sudden coldness sweep through her. "Who?" she whispered again. Ethan's voice dropped even lower. "You." The word hit the air like a stone, heavy and painful. Emily froze, her mind unable to process what she just heard. Daniel stepped back slightly, shock hitting him so hard he lost his breath for a moment. Ethan's hand shook, his voice trembling. "I know it's wrong," he said quickly. "I know it's something that can't happen. I know it's not okay. I never wanted to cross a line." Emily stared at him, her heart breaking not out of anger but out of sadness for the pain he was carrying. "I didn't tell Lily your name," he added, "but she figured it out. She saw how I talked about you, how I wanted to protect you, how I looked forward to seeing you every day." Emily felt tears rising. "Ethan, I care about you deeply," she said. "But not in that way, not ever in that way." "I know," Ethan whispered, wiping his face. "I'm trying to let it go, I swear I am, but it broke me when she left and I didn't know how to face you after that." Emily reached out and hugged him gently, a soft, protective hug filled with love but also clear boundaries. "You're my brother," she whispered. "And nothing changes that love, but you need to heal and let go of this." Daniel watched the scene quietly, his expression shifting from shock to empathy. He saw the heartbreak, the struggle, the confusion in Ethan's face. And though the confession shook the room, Daniel could tell Ethan wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was simply lost, overwhelmed, and trapped in emotions that frightened him. As Ethan pulled away from the hug, trying to regain control, Emily turned to Daniel, her eyes still wet. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. You said you needed to tell me something earlier. Daniel met her gaze, and for the first time that morning, his eyes softened completely. He took a step closer, not hesitant this time but purposeful. Yes, he said. I was going to tell you something important. Emily's heart pounded. What is it? She whispered. Daniel exhaled slowly. Seeing you with Ethan made something very clear, he said. And I can't keep quiet anymore. Emily stood still, waiting, afraid and hopeful at the same time. Daniel held her gaze with a quiet truth he had kept hidden for years. Emily, he said gently, I love you. Her lips parted in shock, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel continued, his voice soft but unwavering. I've loved you for a long time, but I stayed quiet because I thought maybe you weren't ready, or maybe I wasn't what you wanted. He took a breath. But today I realized I can't wait on the sidelines anymore. Emily felt her whole body warm and tremble at the same time. The confession felt overwhelming, unexpected, yet strangely comforting, a truth she had secretly hoped for but never expected to hear spoken aloud. Before she could speak, before she could even breathe out a full response, the silence shattered with the sudden ringing of Ethan's phone. He answered it quickly, his face paling almost instantly. Emily and Daniel rushed toward him. What happened? She asked. Ethan's voice shook as he whispered. It's Dad. He swallowed hard. They need us at the hospital. The room froze, all the emotions pushed aside as fear flooded the space. Everything, every confession, every heartbreak, every unspoken hope would have to wait. The day was far from over, and the next chapter would test all of them in ways they didn't see coming. The drive to the hospital felt endless, even though it took less than 20 minutes. Emily sat in the passenger seat while Daniel drove. With tense concentration, Ethan sat in the back, shaking slightly, staring out the window without blinking. The air in the car felt heavy, filled with fear, worry, and the emotional weight of everything that had happened inside the house earlier. But none of the three spoke, because right now nothing mattered except their father's condition. When Daniel pulled up in front of the hospital, Emily jumped out before the car fully stopped. She rushed inside, breathing fast, her heart pounding with fear as memories of childhood flashed through her mind. Her father was strong, firm, sometimes tough, but always her anchor. He had survived challenges before. But this call sounded different, more alarming, more urgent. They reached the front desk and a nurse guided them to the third floor. Each step felt heavier than the one before. Ethan stayed close behind Emily, his guilt still gripping him, not about his confession anymore, but about the fear of losing their father while the family was so emotionally shaken. Daniel stayed beside them, solid and steady, quietly protecting them without needing to be asked. When they reached the waiting area, their father's doctor approached with a serious but calm expression. He had a sudden drop in blood pressure, the doctor explained. He's stable now, but we need to keep him under close observation. Emily nodded quickly, relief and fear mixing together. Ethan pressed his hands together tightly, and Daniel listened with silent focus, wanting to absorb every detail so they wouldn't miss anything important. Can we see him? Emily asked, her voice soft and shaky. The doctor nodded. One at a time. Emily went first. She pushed open the door carefully, her eyes softening when she saw her father lying on the bed, pale but awake. His face lit up slightly when he saw her. Emily, he whispered with a weak smile. She moved closer, gently holding his hand, refusing to let her fear show. Dad, you scared me, she whispered, her voice trembling like thin glass. He squeezed her hand lightly. I'm not going anywhere, he murmured with quiet confidence. Not yet. Even though his words comforted her, the trembling in his fingers and the weakness in his voice told her he wasn't as strong as he wanted her to believe. She stayed beside him, speaking softly, trying to keep the room calm, trying to hide her worry behind small smiles and gentle squeezes of his hand. After a few minutes, she stepped out so Ethan could go in. He entered slowly, his shoulders tight, his face pale. He wasn't ready for emotional weight, but life didn't wait for readiness. His father looked up at him with a tired smile. Ethan, he said softly. Come here. Ethan moved closer, but his voice cracked before any words could form. I'm sorry, he whispered suddenly, his eyes filling with tears he couldn't stop. His father frowned gently, confused. Sorry for what? For everything, Ethan whispered. For making things harder, for worrying everyone, for not being the son you deserved this year. His father reached out slowly, placing a trembling hand on Ethan's shoulder. You are my son, he said in a careful, steady voice. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be honest. Ethan bowed his head, breathing unevenly. I'm trying, he murmured. His father nodded. That's enough for now. When Daniel's turn came, he entered quietly, respectful of the space that didn't technically belong to him but emotionally did. Their father looked at him with a knowing smile. "You've always been around this family," he said softly. "I appreciate that." Daniel lowered his head respectfully. "I'm here whenever they need me." The older man nodded. "I know," he said. "I can see it." After all three of them had visited, they gathered again in the waiting area, feeling drained but relieved to know their father was safe for the moment. Emily collapsed into one of the chairs, her entire body exhausted. Daniel sat beside her, close enough to support her but far enough to respect her space. Ethan sat across from them, staring at the floor, lost in thought. After a long moment, Emily leaned her head back, her breath unsteady. "This morning feels like a different life," she whispered. Daniel looked at her gently. "I know." Ethan lifted his head slowly. "I shouldn't have dropped all that on you today," he said quietly. "It was the wrong moment." Emily shook her head. "No, Ethan," she said calmly. "It wasn't wrong, it was heavy, but it was honest, and I do love you, even if things are complicated." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting both heartbreak and relief. "I'll get help," he said softly. "I need to talk to someone, I can't keep everything inside anymore." Daniel nodded, impressed by the courage in Ethan's voice. "That's a good step," he said. Emily reached over and squeezed Ethan's hand. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "As a family." The air softened for a moment, the tension easing, replaced with a fragile calm. A nurse walked over and told them their father was resting peacefully and that they could wait until the next visiting period. Emily thanked her, then leaned back again, letting out a long breath she had been holding since morning. Daniel watched her carefully, noticing the exhaustion in her eyes, the emotional strain weighing her down. "You should rest," he said softly. She shook her head. "I can't sleep right now." He nodded, understanding without pushing. "Then just breathe," he murmured. "I'm right here." The gentleness in his voice warmed something inside her, something she had been ignoring for too long. She turned her head slightly and looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time that day, something calm settled inside her chest. "Daniel," she whispered. "About what you said earlier." He inhaled deeply, bracing himself. "You don't have to answer right now," he whispered. "I didn't say it to pressure you." She shook her head, her eyes soft. "I know," she said. "But I can't pretend it didn't touch my heart." Daniel's expression softened completely, the tightness in his chest easing. "You matter to me," he said slowly, "more than I've ever said." Before Emily could respond, Ethan stood up suddenly, clearing his throat. "I need some water," he murmured, walking away to give them space. Emily smiled faintly and turned back to Daniel. "I think I always knew you cared," she said. "I just didn't know how much." Daniel leaned closer but still kept a respectful space between them. "I loved you quietly," he said gently. "But after today, I don't want to stay quiet anymore." Emily felt something warm rise in her chest. "I don't know if I'm ready for anything big," she admitted softly. "But I don't want you far from me." Daniel nodded, understanding perfectly. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. Before either of them could say more, Ethan returned, his face calmer. "They're letting us see him again," he said. The three walked together toward the hallway, the fear still present but softer now, their steps steadier, their hearts a little stronger. Their father greeted them with a weak smile, and Emily held his hand again. Daniel stood beside her, and Ethan stayed close at the foot of the bed. The room felt strangely peaceful, not because their problems had disappeared, but because they were finally facing them together. Their father drifted in and out of sleep, and during one quiet moment he whispered, "You three take care of each other." Emily squeezed his hand. "We will," she promised. Ethan nodded firmly. "I'll do better," Daniel added softly. "You have my word." As the afternoon sun filtered through the hospital window, the family stood there, united in fear, love, worry, and hope, each of them carrying different emotions but all of them connected by something deeper than any confession or misunderstanding. They had walked through a storm that morning, but now, in the quiet of the hospital room, they finally saw a path forward. Ethan finally felt ready to let go of the feelings that had hurt him for so long. Emily felt ready to open her heart to the possibility she had avoided for years, and Daniel felt ready to stand beside her not as the quiet friend, but as the man who loved her honestly. The day that began with a household accident ended with truths uncovered, hearts shaken, and futures changed, but most importantly, it ended with a family standing together, healing in slow, steady breaths, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt something she hadn't felt all week: hope.